The genuine passion of bluegrass music has always captivated me. One verse that's sang in 30 seconds that can stir you. I'm Joe Mullins, and this is My Bluegrass Story. I was born in the middle of bluegrass history. My dad was Paul Mullins. His radio nickname was Moon. Dad was a fiddler and a broadcaster, and part of the Appalachian migration. He was on radio in eastern Kentucky in the early 60s, landed in Middletown, Ohio in 1964, and I was born in 1965. He was a beloved radio personality who included bluegrass music alongside traditional country music, all built around his passion for mountain culture and bluegrass music. And his personality was larger than life for thousands and thousands of radio listeners in southwestern Ohio. So since I can remember, I heard bluegrass music in a commercial setting on radio, saw bluegrass music performed, had every bluegrass album in history in our home. So I've been saturated with it since day one. I saw great musicians with all the classic bluegrass instruments coming and going at our house night and day. And my dad had bought a banjo from some old boy needing some money in the early 70s. And Dad could play a little three-finger style banjo. He'd worked with the Stanley brothers early in his career and had learned to play a little bit from watching Ralph Stanley. And I got the banjo out from under the bed when I was about 12 or 13, and it came very naturally. And just started imitating and emulating what I had seen banjo players do. And as soon as I showed a little bit of natural ability, my dad says, "You need to pay attention to all those Earl Scruggs recordings." And so I took it from there. I was so fortunate as a youngster to have access to Ralph Stanley and Don Reno and J.D. Crowe and Sonny Osborne. They were all family friends, and they were all willing to help when I would get stuck or find a place that I couldn't go the next step. This is one of Earl Scruggs' banjos. It's a Scruggs model Gibson Golden Deluxe at the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum. Feels good, and it's the classic Gibson banjo feel. Many banjo makers have tried to capture what Gibson started in the 1920s. And those banjos of the 20s and 30s are the most coveted in the world. And Gibson realized that, and they realized that Scruggs and what he did with this style banjo when he first made it to Nashville, that was the shot heard around the world. And so Gibson started recreating banjos of that high quality and that high caliber in the 80s and early 90s. And this one came from Earl's hands when it was introduced in the early 90s, and glad it's found a rightful home at the Bluegrass Museum.
I picked up my own at 5 o'clock this morning and headed out to Nashville for the coast. Turned on my favorite early morning DJ, heard Rambling Fever on the radio. Son, right then and there I got to thinking, daydreaming as I drove and sang along. No doubt my lot in life would have been different if I'd have been the guy who wrote that song. Wouldn't be driving this truck if I'd have wrote that song. This old bologna sandwich would be filet mignon. I'd have a Lincoln Navigator and a boat to tow along. I wouldn't be driving this truck if I'd have wrote that song. I broke down a little ways from Flagstaff half a day before I got back on the road. Well, them Highway 40 blues, son, I had them. Then they played a good old country song. And I said to myself, well, I could have come up with that. And I just might when I get back home. I'd be on Easy Street and in the papers if I'd have been the guy who wrote that song. Wouldn't be driving this truck if I'd have wrote that song. This old bologna sandwich wouldn't be filet mignon. I'd have a Lincoln Navigator and a boat to tow along. I wouldn't be driving this truck if I'd have wrote that song. If I'd have wrote that song, this old bologna sandwich wouldn't be filet mignon. I'd have a Lincoln Navigator and a boat to tow along. I wouldn't be driving this truck if I'd have wrote that song. Well, I can do that stuff, and I just about had enough. Wouldn't be driving this truck if I'd have wrote that song.
Horses, bourbon, and the great outdoors. That's Kentucky. Original, majestic, and wide open. In one day, visit legendary distilleries, explore horse country, or put on your hiking shoes and get out there. This is Kentucky. Come see for yourself. Plan your road trip at KentuckyTourism.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Tominski. My favorite magazine is Bluegrass Unlimited. It can be yours too.
Get your subscription to Bluegrass Unlimited, the monthly print publication of bluegrass music since 1966. Bluegrass Unlimited includes feature articles on bluegrass history and tradition, current artists and bands, and so much more. Subscribe today online at bluegrassunlimited.com. And if you subscribe today using code My Bluegrass Story, you'll save 15% of the regular subscription rate.
The Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, located in beautiful Owensboro, Kentucky, is your destination for bluegrass music. With interactive exhibits, you'll learn about the early innovators of the music, like Bill Monroe and Flatt and Scruggs. But you'll also discover the artists of today who are following in their footsteps. But that's just the beginning. Experience the music behind the exhibits by playing music in our pick-and parlor and by enjoying a live show in our beautiful theater. Appearing soon at the Hall of Fame, We Banjo 3 on March 18th, Rhonda Vincent on March 25th, Darren and Brooke Aldridge on April 23rd, Daly and Vincent on May 6th, and Dan Tominski on May 14th. Use the promo code on your screen to save on concert tickets at bluegrasshall.org. And when visiting the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, be sure to check out the exhibit highlighting the artists featured on the television show My Bluegrass Story. Plan your trip to Owensboro, Kentucky today and discover your bluegrass story. Learn more at bluegrasshall.org.
My dad combined broadcasting and fiddle playing. He was a good fiddler. He was on a lot of recording sessions, worked with a lot of good bands. I started doing the same thing. I started on radio part-time in early '82 and was full-time by that summer, still in high school. And that trend continued. I was on radio and an up-and-coming banjo player. And in the late fall of '83, my dad and I and a lifelong friend in Middletown, Ohio, started a band called the Traditional Grass. So the band worked regionally in southwestern Ohio on the strength of my dad's radio personality and me on air also. But we both left radio in early 1989, and that band wound up on the road heavy from the late '80s through the mid-'90s. The Traditional Grass made a lot of records for Rebel Records, one of the dominant and prominent bluegrass labels. We worked a very grueling schedule through the early '90s. So Dad and I were together in every situation you can be in the studio and on stage. Him, the teacher, me, the student often, him, the fiddler, me, the banjo player. The life of a road musician is very exciting, sometimes very rewarding, sometimes it's a real grind. And there's a lot of bad habits that musicians fall into. It's part of the history of everything when it comes to entertainment and life on the road. And I kind of burned myself out physically and emotionally and spiritually through the early '90s. And I had a wonderful salvation experience in early 1995, and it changed everything, as it should. It changed everything for me because then I didn't want to be on the road. I was tired of being who I was and how I was. And the pursuit of what I thought I wanted had cost me almost everything. And I had to change that. And the only way to do that was surrender all and allow Christ to be all and turn me into who He wanted me to be. And okay, that means coming off the road, means taking a pretty successful bluegrass band and wrapping up shop by the end of the summer of '95. What am I going to do for a living? I had a wonderful foundation in radio and became the owner of my first local radio station in Xenia, Ohio in the summer of 1995. I was able to build a regional radio network over the next 10, 15 years after I came off the road full-time and impact a lot of lives and introduce thousands of people to bluegrass music again. And it put the foundation in place for me to rebuild my career as a bluegrass entertainer. That's why it's been Joe Mullins and the Radio Ramblers for the last 15 years, because I'm busy on regional radio and some national radio and on the road with a good band when I'm not at home on the air. How firm a foundation, ye saints of the Lord, is laid for your faith in His excellent word. What more can He say than to you He hath said? Ye who unto Jesus for refuge have fled, in every condition, in sickness and health, in poverty's vale, or abounding in wealth, at home or abroad, on the land, on the sea, as thy days may demand, shall thy strength ever be. The soul that on Jesus doth lean for repose, I will not desert to his foes. That soul, though all hell should endeavor to shake, I'll never, no, never, no, never forsake. That's an ancient hymn I had never heard until I attached to a missionary Baptist church in Ohio about 26 years ago. And an old-time song leader that became a dear, dear family friend used to lead the congregation in that song, and it's meant a lot to me ever since then. And a great friend who was my pastor for 25 years, that's his favorite song. I still lead our congregation that song every now and then. And I've never performed it, but the song's pretty special.
In the heart of bluegrass country, on the banks of the Ohio River, there's a place where healthcare is different, where it's woven into the very fabric of our local communities, where doctors practice more than medicine. They practice living. Here, everyone cares for the patient and treats them like a neighbor, because they are one. This place is called Owensboro Health, where a healthier community is what we do.
There's a city where a river of music flows, where you're invited to discover its deep roots in bluegrass music and heritage and harmonies converge. It's a community that's just like the music it's home to, welcoming and authentic. This is Owensboro, Kentucky. This is the bluegrass music capital of the world.
On June 22nd to 25th, 2022, ROMP Festival takes place in Owensboro, Kentucky. Produced by the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, ROMP features 4 days of music, camping, jamming, and much more. Immerse yourself in bluegrass music by experiencing live performances from over 25 artists. Plan your trip to ROMP Festival in Owensboro, Kentucky on June 22nd to 25th, 2022. More information about ROMP can be found at rompfest.com.
I've been to dozens of bluegrass festivals before I got to be on stage entertaining in my late teens. Dad was always with another band when I was growing up, or he was an MC. I'd tag along, and I knew I'd see every inch of the bluegrass festival grounds growing up, especially those festivals in Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana. And it's a cultural experience. I love the way young and old come together with the common bond of banjos and fiddles and bluegrass entertainment. The first time I got to perform at a bluegrass festival was at Bean Blossom, Indiana, Monroe's Festival in the fall of 1982. Dad had been there many times. I was too little to tag along. I was in high school, I was 16 years old, and Bill put me and Dad together as a duo on stage for a weekend. And it was huge. Loved it, loved being there. And the connection between audience and artist is really special at a bluegrass festival. ROMP has become one of the premier music events, period. Thankfully, it waves the banner for bluegrass. And from members of the Bluegrass Hall of Fame to up-and-coming artists to those Roots and Branches acts, they all get that ROMP stage every summer, and that's a good thing. And it's something that everybody needs to experience. Whether on stage or off, there's entertainment, whether professional or amateur. You can soak up everything to do with bluegrass and bluegrass culture currently at ROMP. And thankfully, it's presented by our Hall of Fame and Museum, so you get to learn a little bit about from whence it came.
They learn reading, writing, Route 23 to the jobs that laid waiting in those cities' factories. They didn't know that old highway could lead them to a world of misery. Have you ever been down Kentucky way, say south of Prestonsburg? Have you ever been up in a holler? Have you ever heard a mountain man cough his life away, digging that black coal in those dark mines, those dark mines? If you had, you might just understand the reason that they left it all behind. They learn reading, writing, Route 23 to the jobs that laid waiting in those cities' factories. They learn reading, writing, roads to the north, to the luxury and comfort a coal miner can't afford. They thought reading, writing, Route 23 would take them to never seen. They didn't know that old highway could lead them to a world of misery. In the car after work on a Friday night, pull up in a holler about 2 a.m. and see a light still burning bright. Those mountain folks sat up that late to hold those little grandkids in their arms, in their arms. And I'm proud to say that I've been blessed and touched by their sweet hillbilly charm. They learn reading, writing, Route 23 to the jobs that lay waiting in those cities' factories. They learn reading, writing, roads to the north, to the luxury and comfort a coal miner can't afford. They thought reading, writing, Route 23 would take them to the good life they had never seen. They didn't know that old highway could lead them to a world of misery. And I thank God for every trip back home, heading south on Highway 23.
The Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, located in beautiful Owensboro, Kentucky, is your destination for bluegrass music. With interactive exhibits, you'll learn about the early innovators of the music, like Bill Monroe and Flatt & Scruggs, but you'll also discover the artists of today who are following in their footsteps. But that's just the beginning. Experience the music behind the exhibits by playing music in our pick-and parlor and by enjoying a live show in our beautiful theater. Appearing soon at the Hall of Fame, We Banjo 3 on March 18th, Rhonda Vincent on March 25th, Darren and Brooke Aldridge on April 23rd, Daly and Vincent on May 6th, and Dan Tominski on May 14th. Use the promo code on your screen to save on concert tickets at bluegrasshall.org. And when visiting the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, be sure to check out the exhibit highlighting the artists featured on the television show My Bluegrass Story. Plan your trip to Owensboro, Kentucky today and discover your bluegrass story. Learn more at bluegrasshall.org.
American Patriot Getaways has cabin rentals in Gatlinburg for any group size or budget. From a romantic studio for 2 to a 13-bedroom chalet, we can help you make memories any time of year. Break away from the everyday and take in the fresh mountain air from our cabin rentals in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. Enjoy luxurious amenities like a steamy hot tub, exciting game room, breathtaking views, or even a private indoor pool. Find your favorite cabin rentals in Gatlinburg today.
I struggle sometimes as a songwriter because I've heard so many great songs for so many years. I played them on the radio. But if I come up with a hook line that's unique, I wrote a pretty good Radio Ramblers song several years ago called A Blue Million Tears. And the song starts out about when I was a kid, I heard my dad say, "If I've told you once, I've told you a blue million times." Some old hillbilly expression. I blew a million times, I blew a million tears. Made a bluegrass song out of it. So I gotta be inspired to have either a really good hook line or a really unique story. I love where the Radio Ramblers have been, and I'm excited about where we're going because there's so much left for us to accomplish and so much more we want to present to audiences, bluegrass and bluegrass gospel.
And there ain't much I won't change to be with you. But I've got to say, you're asking me for something I'm not sure that I could ever do. Now bring your mom to church with us on Sundays. I'll join the gym and try to stay real lean. But if I could, I'm asking one small favor. I've gotta have some bacon bacon in my beans. Bacon in my beans, bacon in my beans. That's how a country boy survives, so baby, don't be mean. I'll cut back on the burgers, make vegetables routine, but I've gotta have some bacon in my...
The most satisfaction in life for me comes from knowing that I'm in the center of God's will. I'm walking on the path that He's made for me, and thankful that I was able to bring a banjo with me and still somehow responsibly raise a son and a daughter, hopefully have a legacy that I can leave them of faith and family and music.
You've made it clear you think it's obscene, but I can't help the way my mama raised me, and I've gotta have some bacon in my beans. Bacon in my beans, bacon in my beans. That's how a country boy survives, so baby, don't be mean.